Hello everyone. Slide 14 on an introduction to cancer biology asks you to consider the factors that are associated with increasing your risk of developing cancer and why those things increase your risk of developing cancer. I put a picture of the world's oldest man from a few years ago, celebrating his 115th birthday, and he smoked for 76 years. He quit when he was 90. He's still around at 115. Smoking, we kind of think, well, there's a risk factor that's going to increase your chances of dying. But there he is, having smoked a fair old whack and not dying. And then we're aware of the stories that there are people who do not, live a very clean life. They do, they don't smoke. They look after themselves, and then, tragically, they can die young. Particularly with cancer, it feels like a kind of a lottery. It's like, how do I avoid it? What do I do? There's no magic bullet for not developing, preventing yourself from developing cancer, in the same way that there's no guaranteed activity that would lead to developing cancer. However, when I say that, I am aware of the sort of caveat that if you were to, go to Chernobyl, for example, and put your, self near to the radioactive core, or, sleep with some radioactive rock under your pillow, or like Alexander Litvinenko, be fed polonium-210 in a cup of coffee to, die of, sort of cancer-related. There are some things you could do that would guarantee you would get cancer. Most things we put into the risk factor category. So the key major risk factor that we have, and we'll explore this in later lectures, and I'll point you towards a piece of research that basically suggested that it was age that was the single biggest risk factor for developing cancer. So the older you get, the more likely you are to develop cancer. And if we pick that apart for a moment, we can see that the older you are, the more times that your cells have undergone cell division to maintain your body, the trillions of cells in your body. We need lots and lots of mitosis going on all the time, lots and lots of cell division. And we know that as that process goes on, spontaneous mutations can occur. So, age and the number of mitotic events that have had to occur in your body will increase your risk of picking up mutations, and then the mutations in the key genes that you'll explore in the rest of this PowerPoint and the rest of this lesson, the key, picking up mutations in the key genes that can help develop or lead to cancer. Other than age, I've hinted at, or we've briefly discussed how increased exposure to agents that can induce mutations will increase your risk factor for cancer. So the more that you smoke, the more that you're exposed to background radiation, the more X-rays that you have, all of those things will increase your risk of developing cancer. So those are risk factors. In the news headlines, we see things like, does drinking alcohol increase your risk of cancer? We know that the higher intake of alcohol people have, they're at higher risk of many different cancers, from mouth cancers, tongue cancers, esophageal cancers, stomach cancers, bowel cancers, and other cancers are all higher and correlate with people who drink more. So does alcohol cause cancer? Alcohol itself is not it does not induce mutations in DNA. So where's the mechanism there? How could there be a link? So we see a correlation, but is there a causal link? It's very hard to pick that apart. We know that some of the processing events that might occur in your body to detoxify alcohol produce, may in your liver, for example, may increase the amount of oxidative damage that goes on in those cells. How that translates to cancers elsewhere in your body. So it seems that the cells that are exposed, the mouth, the tongue, the esophagus, they are at higher risk of having mutational issues that lead to cancer due to alcohol intake. So So yes, it's an area of research. Explore, what's the link there between alcohol? How, what's the mechanism? How is alcohol leading to increased risk, of cancer? How is it inducing mutational changes in cells? There are other things in the headlines. Obesity is another strong risk factor associated with developing cancer. People who are obese are at higher risk of developing cancer. Why? Why is that? We know that the heavier that you are, the higher the BMI. The risk of developing different cancers increases. What's the mechanism? Scientists are busy trying to unpick that. Other risk factors. Another sensationalist headline you might see in the Mail is, eating barbecued sausages, burnt sausages. How does that increase your risk of developing cancer? And then scientists will explore some of the mechanisms behind that, the types of molecules that you'll find developing in, burnt meat, and whether they are cancer, whether they increase the risk of mutation. And, you can see perhaps that some of those various chemicals that are produced by burning meat, may lead to increased mutational rate in cells. So yes, there are many risk factors associated with developing cancer. And we can some of them have a much more clearer mechanistic causal process than others. Some are more obvious. Smoking, if you set fire to the cells of plant that you find in plant leaves, we know that cells are filled with a range of different chemicals, from the phospholipid bilayers to all of their proteins and DNA and all the other things that you'll find inside those cells. When you set fire to them and combust that material, the tobacco itself is a bit damp, it doesn't fully combust, and all of those carbon, hydrogen and oxygen based molecules, with some nitrogen and sulfur and phosphorus put in there, undergo various different chemical reactions to produce a range of different chemicals. You can look them up, the many different chemicals that you find in cigarette smoke, from formaldehyde to benzene and other things. Some of those chemicals will strongly come out as mutagens and carcinogens in tests like the Ames test that you looked at. So think more about risk factors than causative agents when we talk about cancer. The man there, 115, smoked for 76 years, quit when he was 90, he's still going. That smoking has not killed him. Only 1 in 4, this is a fascinating, marvellous statistic, 1 in 4 smokers will develop lung cancer. That's massively higher than the risk of developing lung cancer if you don't smoke. But 3/4 of people who smoke won't go on to develop lung cancer and won't die of lung cancer. That suggests that despite all of those chemicals being inhaled deep into your lungs over a prolonged period of time, the remarkable chance events that need to occur to lead to the relatively few key mutations that need to occur for cells to develop into cancer cells. Over the next few slides in the next lesson, we'll talk about some of the genes that need to become mutated to lead to the cancer phenotype, for cells to lose control of the cell cycle, enter into uncontrolled cell division, and ultimately have genomic instability unless those cells accumulate mutations. But we'll see that the amount of DNA that we have in our cells there's a huge amount of it. Most of it is non-coding, and most of the stuff that's coding, if mutations occur in it, they're not going to lead to cancer. And some of them, the tumor suppressor genes in particular, the mutations are recessive, which means that both genes both your copies of that gene need to be mutated in order for the cell to develop cancer. And that becomes incredibly unlikely. But there are maybe 30 to 50 trillion cells in your body, which is a large number of cells, and there's a significant amount of spontaneous and induced mutational events that occur that across a lifespan of maybe 80 years or more in humans makes ultimately 1 in 2 of us likely to develop cancer at some point in our lives. The great news is, obviously, the hope is out there that many cancers are treatable. And that, in true Luke style, I forgot to talk about one of the key risk factors is genetic inheritance. I'll finally just briefly discuss this. So we'll look at how there are 2 main types of genes involved in being required to be mutated to develop cancer. There are tumor suppressor genes and proto-oncogenes. If you, by chance, are born with any of those alleles already mutated, then that massively increases your risk of developing cancer. So BRCA1 and BRCA2 are good examples of alleles that are out there in the population, and if individuals inherit those alleles already mutated, then it becomes more likely for them to pick up the additional mutations that are required to develop cancer. So even though BRCA1 and BRCA2, people who have those alleles who are born with them, it's still not guaranteed that they will develop cancer, but around 60% of those individuals will develop cancer. Okay. And again, another final risk factor. Many viruses carry oncogenes. So the HPV virus is another good example of a virus that has, at some point in its evolutionary history, captured a human oncogene, and now it infects cells and induces them to divide in an uncontrolled way, transforming them into cancer cells. So we do see many cancers associated with viral infection, and indeed the very first oncogene was identified in individuals who've been infected by viruses. Thank you.